Hello everyone, this is the second video uh, about Keras for neural networks and feature learning using the neural networks. Now in this video we will figure out the convolutional neural networks and how we can incorporate it using the Keras framework, and we will also see how these features are actually being learned and represented and how we can make use of them within a deep learning framework or within other machine learning models. So to start we will import few things, train test split, numpy, keras, submodules for keras, and from the layers the one we will be using now would be the convolutional 2D and the max pooling 2D. uh, Mainly these are the kind of layers that we need for convolutional networks. We also have some reloop, preloop, softmax things, and the losses, the categorical cross entropy loss, this is the one that works fine, works really nicely with the softmax. So it knows what the softmax can provide, and it does the loss calculation accordingly. We will have another lab on custom loss functions, and we will see why we might need that. Sweet, and two categorical here to do the one hot encoding. One hot encoding. Alright, so our task 2A is to download the MNIST dataset. Dataset is set of images for handwritten digits, and the application domain was for banking applications. So the dataset is available in TensorFlow. TensorFlow is the back end that Keras is using, so that's why they're all working together now. And from that you have keras.dataset.mnist.load data. This will load the data for you, will load the training, and the validation dataset will also always split it for you. Now, one thing that you might need to do when working with images is to make sure that the values are not integers. Usually the grayscale images are ranging from 0 to 255, and if it's color images, it will be 0 to 255 for 3 channels, which is the red, green, and blue. These numbers are way too big when you're calculating gradients, because you have so many pixels. The resolution for these images are 28 by 28, I believe. So working with this kind of dynamic range of values, when you sum up and do the average and do the gradient, all of this, it will give you a very high gradient. So you will have to either really drop the learning rate to unrealistic measures, or better yet, actually pre-process the data to make sure that it ranges between the 0 and 1. You can do this with the min-max scaler that we used before, and you can do this with the standard scaler as well. But in this case, we know what the highest value is, what the lowest value is, so it's easier to just divide by 255 and call it a day. So that this is the reason, and the answer here would be to make sure input data between 0 and 1 and avoid what's known as exploding gradients. Now the other aspect is why we're expanding the dimensions here, and to do this, let's just load the data first. I'll just add a break here. So we'll run this one, we will run that one. Now let's examine what train X um, has in the shape. So the train X has 60,000 samples. Each one of them is 22 by 22. This is what we have here. Now the neural networks, or the convolutional layers, are assuming that you are using colored images, so you have multiple channels. We actually want this to be 60,000, so I'll just write it 60k 128 by 28. This should be the format or the shape that the neural network is actually expecting here. So this is why we are expanding the dimension. So when we do numpy dot expand dimensions like this, we'll give it train x and -1. So we're saying that we'll just expand the dummy dimension. We'll not really specify what the size is, so we don't change anything on the shape. This should give us, if we get shape of this, this will give us 28 by 28 by 1. The channels are miscalculated earlier. Alright, so we'll just run this. We'll run the other one here, which does the dimension expansion, and we take the train y and validation y, convert it to two categorical to make a one hot encoding. So this is for one hot encoding. Dimension for channels. Shape should be 60K, 28, 28, and 1. Alright, so we'll run this one. Now we have our train x and val x, so let's check these. Train x dot shape and also val x dot shape. Now we have train validation y, which would be 10,000, and we have validation y one hot dot shape, which should be 10,000 by 10. So now if we take validation y and say check what the first sample is, it will say number 7. This is the value this is the first y that we have. Now if we do the same and take one hot, it will give you zeros everywhere and 1 at 7, and then there is 8 and 9. So basically what we're saying, this is the distribution that should be inferred from the neural network, and this distribution should give me 1 at 7 and zeros everywhere else. Practically speaking, when you're actually doing the training, it will be highest at 7, and the residuals will be distributed among the other classes. Okay, let's define our model. Basically, we are having a sequential model here. We give it a name, and would start with an input layer. Now we have to specify the shape. We're saying 28 by 28 by 1, which means this image is 28 pixels on the height, 28 pixels on the width, and one color channel. This means it has only one layer of colors, which is being grayscale. Bear in mind the word image here is just a data structure for us. It's more of a matrix of data that you have collected. These data could be coming from an image sensor or a camera, could be coming from a depth sensor, could be calculated from other algorithms or other work that you have done. It doesn't matter. In the end, it is a matrix that is 28 by 28 by 1. The second layer we're adding here is the convolutional layer. We're asking for 16 filters. The filters or the kernels here, sometimes they're called kernels, that's why we're saying kernel size. The kernels or the filters here are the feature extractors. These are the signals. If you do convolution with the input image or the input matrix, it will produce the features that you need to learn to train your model on. In every layer, you can specify what is the number of features you're detecting in this layer, and then you can specify what are the what's the size of this kernel. It doesn't have to be the same size, could be 5 by 3, 3 by 2, whatever it is. It just depends on the type of data that's coming in and what you want to do with it. So after this layer, what it will produce to you is a convolution between these 16 kernels and the image. After that, you need to select the maximum neuron that got fired, which we do by using the max pooling 2D layer. This one was saying make a window 2 by 2, move in non-overlapping manner, and only select the highest or the brightest neuron in these feature maps. So you can add more layers here, and these will be basically convolutional pooling. Convolutional pooling can add dropout here and there. You don't have to add a pooling after each convolutional. You can add 3 or 4 convolutionals. Then you do the pooling at once at the very end. And each one of these architectures has its own merits, pros and cons, and it really depends on the problem. And many of the experiments, they're actually done by trial and error, but eventually you will pick up the sense of what actually happens when you run multiple convolutionals and then at the very end one pooling or do excessive pooling. There are several ways to do the things. Now, after we extract our features, we will use a classifier, which is in our case the softmax layer, or the multi-layer perceptron, which is a softmax layer. The question in the code that's on Moodle was, is sigmoid was the correct one? And the answer was no. The reason being is that we need a distribution at the very end. Sigmoid will run sigmoid on all the neurons at the same time. Softmax is the one that will give us the distribution. Alright, so now we have defined our feature extractors here, our input here, feature extractors here, and the classifier here. Bear in mind that by the time you get out of these feature extractors, you have a 3D matrix. You have probably 16 by 16 by 32 filters, or the 16 filters in that case. You need to flatten these into one dimension so you can use the multi-layer perceptron, and this is why we need the flattened layer here. After this, we will compile our model. We'll set Adam as our optimizer, and the loss will be categorical cross entropy loss. This loss is specifically designed to work very well with the softmax and ensure that the updates would reflect the inputs that the softmax is expecting. Now, after that, we train our model. We fit it on train X and train Y1 hot, and then we'll give it also the validation data, batch size 1000, 5 epochs for now, and verbose to run it. Let's run this one. Now you would see that it is now trying to fit these values. It's learning the features. The error is dropping on the loss and on the training and validation loss. You see here, after the max pooling, we have 12 by 12 by 16. 12 by 12, every time you do convolution, you drop some of the size because you have padding at the very end. And this 16 is the number of filters that we asked for here. So it was 16 filters, and this will propagate through the max pooling. Now, before you go into the dense network, you have to flatten this. That's why we need the flatten layer here, and this would be 12 by 12 by 16, which will give you this number. Now our model is trained. The error is relatively good. It's not the best, but yeah, but it works. Now, to predict or to use our model, we can say model dot predict what was it, val x sub 0 to 1. This will give us the very first sample, and this would be the distribution that we have there. It should be highest at 7, and this is point times x times 10 power negative 1. To get what the actual value is, then you can say let's get this to output, and then out.argmax, which will give you the index of the highest value, and this would be 7. What was the actual what was the validation y sub 0? It was 7. Nice. Awesome. So the model is actually training very nicely. Alright, now let's dissect the model again. Let's see what the model actually learned and how to visualize this. The way we do that, we'll import matplotlib for plotting, and then what we really want to do is wrap a new model around the same input of the old model and specify the output to a certain layer that we want to see what's coming out of it. In this case, what we're saying is create a new model. It takes model.inputs, which is starting from here, and then outputs will be model.layers sub 0 dot output. Layer sub 0 is this one. This is the very first layer, and dot output, because each layer has an input tensor and an output tensor, so we're choosing the one that's getting out of it. This is more on the technical side of how TensorFlow works, but this would give you the output of the very first layer. Now when we print this summary, it should give us um, the, the architecture of the new model that we have, and we can use misclicked here, and then we can use any sample and then predict this sample. This will give me a feature map, or rather feature maps. How many feature maps? How many feature maps? This would be 16, because we asked for 16 filters. Each filter will give me a new feature map. And then we can plot the source image, we'll call it source image, and make a new figure, plot the feature map, and we call it feature map. We'll go into these indices in a second. Now let's run this piece of code, and we'll see we have feature map and we have the source image. Source image is mainly just 5, number 5 is written, is handwritten there, and feature maps is what the machine, or what the neural network actually produces after applying the first layer. So when we feed this image into the trained neural network, it will give us a feature map like this. We can rely on this feature map, flatten it, pass it to the classifier or the multilayer perceptron, and we'll do the processing for you. Is it enough? We don't know. You might need more features, yes, more features or more feature maps. You might need more layers, so adding more hierarchical representation of the data there. Now, one thing I need to highlight here is why we're doing train x sub 0 to 1. And to do this, we have to examine the shape. Now, when we run this, I want you to look at the input layer. The input layer is 28 by 28 by 1. If we get train x sub 0, I need a shape. Dot shape. This will be 28 by 28 by 1. But the model is expecting an additional dimension for the mini batch, to have multiple images at the same time. This is because you can actually run your model this way. New model, train x sub 0 to say 5. So this will run the model on 5 samples, the very first 5 samples. And each one of them will give you a different feature map. Now if you check the shape of this will be 5 images that were assessed. They produce 24 by 24 feature maps each, and we have 16 feature maps for each image of these 5. So this is why we need to use it the other way, and we need to get train x sub 0 to 1. Remember, the 1 here is, let me zoom in a little bit on this one. Oh, much better. The 0 here is inclusive, the 1 is exclusive, but what we doing with this trick is making sure that it keeps the dimension of the shape. So when we do this dot shape, it will be one image, 28 by 28, and then one channel. While if we do it the other way, which is just sub-0, this will be 28 by 28 by one channel, but it's not preserving the dimension of the mini patch. Alright, now the color map here is being gray. You can replace this with hot HSV or whatever, and this will be giving you things in color. Now I want you to look at the feature maps when you run this code at your time. Look at the feature maps and try to check where are the highest firing neurons and where are the lowest ones. You can see the highest firing one is here, there. So you would assume that this feature, the kernel that produced this feature map would be focusing on corners like this. There is also low firing neurons here, and this will be covered with other kernels. That's why we ask for multiple kernels. We don't just say I need one kernel here. That's why we said 16 or 32 or 60 or whatever. I put 16 here for a reason, is mainly to be easier to plot when we visualize all of them at once, which we are going to do now. Okay, so we are actually going to do the same trick here. We'll copy these parts. We don't need this, but we will clear it up. But this part is actually fair enough here to create our model. So now we have our model, and we know now that the feature maps, we need this for the image. Now we know that the feature maps will be 16, so we can actually make a figure that has a 4 by 4 axes, and on each one of them we will we will plot or visualize what the kernels are and what the filters or the feature maps are. So we'll do figure and axes equals plt.subplots, and then n rows equals 4, n columns equals another 4, and then we want to loop over these, and we want to loop over the feature maps that were predicted here. So we'll say for I and x in enumerate axes, and then we'll say x.imShow for image show, and we want the feature maps sub 0. This is because we have the mini batch dimension, so we want to get rid of that, and then we'll take every pixel here and every pixel on the other dimension, and here we will add I for the feature maps. This should visualize the feature maps for all the images that we have shown, which let's take the source image as well here. Let's show this here. I misclicked. I am show axis.flat. You can use flatten and it should work fine, but I usually try to not use flatten because it is a fairly slow method to flatten the matrix. Okay, so this would be our feature maps here. Now this color map is not really what I want. Let's get rid of that. So we'll say cmap equals gray. Okay, so this would be our input image, and these are the different feature maps that were learned or that were produced by only the very first layer. We need to get rid of these redundant axes. We can just use the same axes for all of them. So this can be done from here. We'll say share x equals 2 and share y equals 2. That's another thing. I did something bad. Oh, comma. And there we go. That's actually nice. Sweet. What is next? Ah, we need to add a title for the figure. Let's clean up these figures. That's way too much. And I believe it was fig.soup title, super title, I believe. And this will be feature maps. I hope I'm doing this right. Oh, I did. That is sweet. Cool. Now let's do the same exact thing for the kernels, for the actual features. Now to do this, we need to again open up the model and get these kernels. To do this, we did this before with the multilayer perceptron by using the getWeight methods, and we are going to use the same thing with the convolutional layers here. Okay, so let's see what our model has. Get weights, and we'll call it WS like this. Now let's see what WS sub 0 has. This would be a huge set of matrices there, but we can check the shape to get an insight. And there you have it. We have 5 by 5 kernels by 1, which is the depth of the kernel, because the kernel can be 3D as well. And we have 16 out of them. So the very first layer, the weights of the very first layer are 16 kernels, each of which are 5 by 5. Now we can visualize this. So we can add a new one here, and let's say ws equals model dot what is get weights, and then we'll say layer 1 kernels equals ws sub 0. And we will make a new figure the same way here. I'll just call it feature extractors. But instead of using the feature maps here, we don't really need that. We want the layer 1 kernels. And we'll use this here, kernels sub. Now we need to get all the 5 pixels here and 5 pixels there, so this would be colon and colon. And we probably don't need that one because it's only one dimension. and this 16 will iterate over them and plot in the corresponding axis, so this will be I. Hope I'm not making a mistake here, but can always correct it. So let's run this one. Now let's examine what features do we have. So these are the features that we have. These are 5 by 5 feature extractors, and when you look at it from far enough, you will see it is actually exhibiting some patterns. For example, in this um, kernel, this kernel is subtracting the things at the top from the things at the bottom. This kernel is subtracting almost everything around the center pixel, and that's why it's producing something like that. And this one is fairly random, as you can imagine, which is why it is producing something like this. This kernel is emphasizing the diagonal edges, and you can see that apparent in here in this side, and so on and so forth. So as you see, you can visualize the learned features, and you can visualize the kernels, the feature extractors, and the learned feature maps for each one of these. Let's try another number. Actually, I want to try some other number. Let's take 1 to 2. This would be a 0, and these are the feature maps with the 0. The kernels will be the same because it's not dependent on the input image, so we'll have the same kernel images here. And let's see, this will accentuate the top edge of the 0, and it's showing in here. I think the random one will be random everywhere as well, like this, and the next one as well. This will be comparing the top to the bottom, so it will get an edge that is brighter at the top, and so on. I hope this helps. Now the next step is, if we have feature maps, why don't we use them in other models? And this would be the next thing that we'll do now. Okay, so let's make a new cell here, and here we will use feature maps with other ML models. So we have our model here. Let's just copy that from here, and not this one, all the way. Oh, we can just edit it here. Okay, so we have our model, and we know how to get the feature maps now. So let's copy these parts. Now we need to use this method to run over all our train X inputs to map it into the feature vector that we will use later on. This is a mouthful, and we'll dissect it a little bit. So we'll take the very first one, or maybe one. Oh, sorry, 0 to 1. So what happens when I do this? Now, if I examine feature map dot shape, this would be 1 by 1, 1 by 24 by 24 by 16. Now let's check the size of this. This is the size after flattening. This would be 9,216 features. If you are going to build, say, a decision tree using this many features, this is insane, because you will have a huge tree that would take ages to actually train. So this is not a really good feature map for us. We want a little bit smaller map. So let's take maybe the layer after the pooling. very first layer was just convolution. The layer after the pooling should drop things a little bit. So after the pooling, it's 12 by 12 by 16. So now if we get the feature map.size, this will be 2304. Still way too much. So we might need to actually consider expanding our model a little bit to learn more features, but at the same time maybe 7 7 5 5 say 3 3. This would be hierarchical features. First kernels will learn overall kernels. The second layer, the second convolutional block would learn slightly smaller features, but will learn on top of what the 7 by 7 did, and the 3 by 3 will learn on top of the what the 5 by 5 did. Now if we run this one, I'm not sure if we have enough size for that. We do not actually. We might want to comment this one. Okay. So at the very end we have only 16 neurons flattened, and the very end, actually the last convolutional network layer, will give you 1 by 1 by 16. Not sure if this would actually learn something useful though. Not bad. It's good enough. The problem is fairly trivial, so that's why it actually works even if we change things here and there. So after this we'll have a feature vector of 16 by 16 of 16 values. It's 1 by 1 by 16. Close enough, close enough. Sweet. Now let's run our part here, and this would be, oh yeah, we need to get the layer before the very end, before the at the flatten, before the dense. So we need to know which layer is that. We have to examine what the layer names are. So model.layers, and then last one, this is the dense. If you say name, I think it has a name called output. This output is what we added here. Yep, that's why I told you you probably need to add names, and we should have done this here so we can index them by name, but that is okay. Now if we take -2, this will be the flattened one. Yes, sweet. So we need to use -2 here. Okay, now let's run this and see what we have in terms of feature maps. Now feature maps dot shape 1 by 16. 1 because we have only one image, and there is 16 features that got learned from the feature extractors. Okay, so if we make this 10, it should be 10 by 16. And let's do that again. Sweet. So now we can actually run everything through our feature learner, or the learned features, and then get a set of features at the very end, which we will use with another classifier. I'm thinking decision trees or SVM or whatever. Okay, so if we now run train X inside everything, this should actually give us 60. It's running everything. Yeah, okay. And our feature map shape would be 60,000 by 16. That is good. Okay, so now this is our input data. let's call it train X features, and this will be train X. Don't need this anymore. Now we'll do the same thing for validation. And this would be val X. We don't need this anymore. Okay, now let's do the Y's. And the Y's are actually the same thing that we already have. I believe the Y's are already labeled. It was train Y and val Y. Okay, sweet. So we have our features, training, validation, and we have our training and validation Y's. Now let's import. Let's do this. We'll run this one more time, and then here we'll do from sklearn.tree import decision. Autocomplete. Yep. Awesome. Okay, we'll make a CLF classifier equals decision tree classifier something, and then CLF dot fit, and we'll give it what we learned from before, which is train X feature. Come on. Yep. And the Y will be the training Y. Now the validation. It doesn't take validation input. Okay, sweet. Now let's run this one. Okay, so our CLF is actually learned something. Let's see. Support, not support, it was feature importance, was it? Yeah. Okay, so we have 16 features. One of them is the highest, I believe. This one or that one? This one is the highest, I believe. So we can actually say do this dot argmax and feature 1, which is this one. This is 0, this is 1. Sweet. Now let's see if our tree is actually working. Let's see CLF dot predict. What do we have? We have val x sub 0. That's a good thing. The tree we trained was on the new features, not the val x. Val x itself is an image, so we need val x features sub 0. We're still doing a mistake. Let's see what I did wrong. Val x features dot shape sub 0. I believe it's sub 0 to 1. Yeah. So the val x feature sub 0 to 1, again to keep the dimension. The tree was expecting a dimension there. Sweet. Now let's check what the val y was at 0, and it was 7. That is sweet. Now let's validate this. Once I CLF dot predict everything from the val x features, and we'll call this y hat. and our y would be the val y. I'll call it y org. Val y. Now we need the metrics from sklearn dot metrics really import classification report. Yep, and we want to print classification report. This takes y true, which is y org in our case, and y predicted, which is y hat in our case. And let's just for labels, hang on, labels, screw that. Okay, let's run this, and there we have it. You have it for, oh, it's already labeled. Awesome. We have it for each one of these classes, and you have what the precision recall and F1 score for each one of them, and so on. I hope this makes sense to you now. I believe now we know how to design and run a neural network, and how to do the same with a convolutional neural network to deal with images. We have examined what the kind of features that we have there, and the feature maps that come from every different input image. I'll just arrange these a little bit here. Just arrange this here, arrange that here, put this here, and put that here. And each one of these feature maps are actually driven from one of these filters. This is the whole idea of feature learning now, and you can use these features either with a machine learning with a neural network model itself, or you can use it with other machine learning models. If you want to use it with say decision tree or SVM or any other kind of model that you want. In fact, the actual model that we used here with the neural network is actually split into, let me label this for you, input, and here would be feature extractor. All of this is feature extractor, and after you flatten it, actually I would say here, this would be classifier. So the entire deep network that we worked with here has one layer for classification at the very end. This is the classifier. This is the one that we replaced by the decision trees or any other machine learning model. These are the ones that had the feature learning in our model. Hope this helps. This code I will upload it as part of the description in the videos, and hopefully you will have some fun with these fancy models. Thank you.